Well, there have been some interesting studies done in schools, for example, with preschoolers, where if you go into the classroom and look at using a childish lens, what is going on in the classroom, you actually find this is not as specific as you want, I don't think, but you do find even very young children uh, actively bringing themselves into the classroom, and it may or may not be recognized by the teacher or by the school as important, but in fact, the solution is already there in a certain sense. That just like adults, children are extremely diverse people who have a lot of different experiences and ideas and thinking to bring to whatever situation they're in, and so a lot of it is seeing what's already there and responding to that. But that's just again a rather general way of looking at it again.
Yeah, I've been thinking of how it's not just about seeing things from children's point of view. Like that's a very important step. And another important step is also, of course, to become aware of, in what ways are we adultist, and not in like you don't like beat yourself over it. It's just to become aware of, what is adultist about my teaching practice, my relationship, with children. The childist lens or also childist attitude would be the transformative step, which would be basically, I mean, a simple practice. For example, at the end of the day, just write down three things that you learned from your students. So at least every day, like actively thinking of how is your life transformed as a result of that relationship with that person. What are they contributing? So it could be, simple practices like discussion circles, like amongst, let's say, teachers and the, school managements, parents, like just to get together and talk about how are our children and students, like how are they enriching learning processes, how are we as adults also learning something. So it's like once the more and more you become aware of that, they will, school systems will transform. But until and unless that acknowledgement is not happening at a very active level, it's not sufficient to simply see things from their perspective or recognize adultism, but actively say, okay, I want to make my learning an active part of my teaching practice. So there's a kind of humility as well that is required to let children take the lead as well.
I would add also that in a more structural sense across, for example, a school, you could look at who is running the school or on what basis are they running the school. And of course, a lot of schools have student councils and things like that. Students can go to the board meetings or what have you, but they tend to be rather tokenistic and they don't tend to have to do with actually changing anything that happens in the school. They tend to be around school dances and things like that, which is wonderful. But are the young people being educated involved at all in the ways in which their education is organized? And there could be many different ways that could be much more meaningfully done. I think where I am in the United States, people tend to assume that children are not really capable of doing much of that kind of stuff. But if you look at children around the world, they're running children's parliaments from the age of 5. They're working jobs and supporting families at very early ages. They're engaged in the public culture and community starting from birth. And so we tend to have privatized children, which is part of this infantilization of them, and thought of them as not having any real public roles. And I think that translates into schools into this idea that the children don't know what is needed to get a good education. But actually, if you are able to have a dialogue amongst children and involve them in a real way and give them real power and real say over what happens, I don't think schools or teachers have to be defensive about that and think that their rights are going to be taken away. I think, on the contrary, it would provide a much richer discussion about what's really working, what's not working, what could we do differently, how can we think creatively, so that the actual people we're supposed to be educating, actually tell us what's going on.